Here we are, episode 24 of the Two Russells podcast. And I've been hearing that a few people have been in contact with John Ennis since he was on here last episode.
I think it's fair to say, shall I be so bold, Russ, as to say I think we just made Loman's year.
Ah,
I'm sure they'll disagree with that.
And I'm
sure
sure
they disagree with that.
I'm sure you've got the invoice on the way, Russell.
Oh yes, I think we should definitely get a piece of that.
And also, several people have messaged me privately on how they've got their health check sorted out, feeling better about themselves generally. So, including yourself, because you popped along, didn't you?
Yes, I went through the results. They were horrendous. I just need some lifestyle changes. No, not that bad. It's interesting, isn't it? So that we're helping to facilitate the acquisition and sale of property businesses. We're also saving lives.
That's it.
Through having Sue on. You can hear the laughter in the background here from our next
with
guest.
emergency service.
Well, we are, yeah, making sure that people get these kind of diagnoses nice and early so they can change their lifestyle, be healthier, be better people and live longer. There you go.
And I know that's a subject very close to our next guest's heart. And I'll introduce him now. Kristjan Byfield, welcome.
Thank you, guys. Hi, all.
At last, and can I just say, you see that we left it 24 episodes till we got to you. I'm just saying.
Thank you so much.
Often known as the Viking.
I mean, who knows why?
Tell us. Tell us why.
The legitimate reason is that I am half Viking. My mother's Icelandic. And then the less legitimate reason is that I grow this thing and occasionally turn up to industry events
with a helmet
as a
on,
Viking.
with horns on.
With a horn helmet, which, as everyone knows, is not real Viking. But
is it not?
My Icelandic relatives have made a point of messaging me pretty much every time I post photos of one of my interesting dress-ups, reminding me that there are no Vikings do not wear horns.
Appropriation, it's inappropriately cultural.
Oh yeah, but then I remind them that all the gift stores in Iceland selling Viking memorabilia all have horn helmets, and I'm like, see,
I think it's important that we did the explanation because the whole industry wonders why, and now we know.
They're mystified by it.
It's interesting because for me, in the world that I worked in 5 years ago, we didn't really entertain or go to any industry events. Very few, the odd negotiator award. So when I came into my new world at Rayner Personnel, I was suddenly attending events and meeting wonderful people like yourself.
Every other week.
We first met at the Agents Giving Ball, I think it was.
Oh Lord, which one?
I think 2 or 3 years ago. And I'm thinking, well, firstly, I met Simon Whale. I thought, well, who is this? And then
that takes a bit of getting over.
So I've got a man in a mirror ball.
You remembered anyone after Simon?
I had a man in a mirror ball helmet turn up, followed by a Viking, and I'm thinking, wow, there is a world outside of the business I was in previously, and we had a fascinating conversation then. 3 years later, we've bumped into each other at various do's, and then in December I responded to a post you'd put out on Facebook around men's mental health and said, look, we need to I'd love to try and help and support in some way, because it's a subject that we have been discussing, and I'm going to start there because that's where we first sort of connected and talked about. I said, come on the podcast and talk about that first, then we'll delve into the Depositary, and then we'll delve into base as well. So talk to me about your passion for helping others.
I think it fundamentally comes from a genuine belief that our lives should be full of joy. You know, you should love what you do as a career. You should love the life you come home to. That's not always achievable at the optimum level, but I think it's something we should always aspire to. And I think when you underpin everything like that, if you underpin everything with a pursuit of joy, and everyone gets joy from different things, and I think that's why it's a nice thing to have, because you're not quantifying what that joy is. You don't have to be more profitable, a bigger business, a better parent, or whatever. It's just whatever that is. And I think that's always kind of been the underpinning, and that was very much an underpinning when Anne and I first decided to go into business. One of the core things that we wanted to focus on was building a business that people loved coming into work for. And I think that all feeds into your mental health, feeling good and happy. I think if you're pursuing a career in something that you're passionate about and enjoy the roller coaster ride that comes with that, or most of the roller coaster ride, I think that's a really healthy place to start. And I think then off the back of that, obviously over the last 20 years, there's been a huge kind of awakening or opening of conversation around mental health. I think primarily more on the female side of things to begin with, and then I think in recent years, backed by a lot of data out there, obviously there is a huge issue with men's health at the moment, and I think it comes back to that joy.
Them not talking about it.
Yeah, I think it's not talking. I think social media also plays a huge part in that, in creating false perceptions of what is successful and what people live in their lives, and what, again, coming back to what is joy. If your joy is looking fabulous with perfect skin and a six-pack abs and wearing fancy clothes and driving a Ferrari, great. Thank you. Just be sure.
Just acknowledge that. Thank you.
It's a Porsche.
But just be sure that that really is what makes you happy.
So why do you think people fundamentally are, and are we saying they're less happy now than maybe in the days before the prevalence of social media? Do you think we're trying to compete too much, which then leads to mental health issues?
I think social media has driven a compulsion for people to present themselves as being permanently successful and happy.
And to live up to something that isn't real.
To live up to something which isn't real. They're benchmarking themselves against whatever you want to call it, fantasy people online. And I think all too often they're lying to themselves.
Which is interesting. You may have heard Rob Jupp's episode 2 episodes ago. 2 years ago, he took the decision to come completely off social media because he was realising that he did the screen time. I'm going to do it myself. He did the screen time to realise he's spending a day a week.
It's terrifying. You look at the time.
Looking at social
and when you actually stop and really are honest with yourself about what you get out of it, it raises a lot of questions. Well, I've got 2 young kids at the moment. I've got a 3 and a 7-year-old, and thank Christ, my eldest daughter hasn't yet asked for a phone, but that will come at some point.
School,
and we're already having those conversations now because we want to be prepared. And I do think social media is going to change. I think with everything, with technology and society and everything else. I think there will be a change, and already I'm very involved in my niece's life, who's 25, and it's been fascinating to see her kind of grow up through the kind of social media generation through university. And
youngsters end up being a bit more cynical about it in a good way. They stop living by it and think, well, that's just bullshit. So I'm not going to be into that now anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I think increasingly the young people that I talk to, maybe not kind of mid-teens, but getting into late teens and then on into early to mid-20s, I think there's definitely a waking up to the fact it is.
So if mental health is a thing, and look, we can't, the 3 of us, I'm afraid, sit here and cure why perhaps there might be an explosion of mental health issues, anxiety, depression, whatever that might be. But so we can't do much about the causes. What can we do? What can you do, you think, in terms of your endeavours to try somehow and help, as we're talking about men being prevalent in this problem? What can we, maybe as an industry, do to assist?
Look, I think for me, it's the thing is that there's no singular solution. There is no one fix to this problem.
But talking?
I think ultimately just if everyone can do a little bit, what they can. I think it's just things like, if you've got that friend who always says they're okay, don't let them get away with always saying they're okay. You know your friends and family well.
The ones that go quiet.
You know when they look a little bit burnt out, or they've, that little look in their eye, or the jaunt in their skin, or, that response doesn't quite have the same tone it does. Don't let them get away with it. Don't let them get away with that. And I think Rob Brady has a great one about no more fine. Fine standing for fucking incapable of naming an emotion.
Yeah.
And I think it's genius. I've heard Rob say it once, and it has stuck with me ever since. And it really made me laugh when he did the acronym, because I thought it is absolutely genius. It's just those little things. If you think your friend or family member is having a hard time, don't let them get away with telling you they're fine.
And you're trying to use social media for the good part of it. It's the Facebook group. So before we go on to base and depository, just share that with the audience, the Facebook group.
So the boys club, which really came about, was Ben Madden's kind of brainchild, and he very quickly reached out to a handful of others, myself, Spencer, from Paramount, Toby, who was up until recently at Reside, Bath, and Daniel. And he wanted to do something, but we were very careful to begin with, and we had quite a long chat just amongst us about what did the boys club look like and what did we want to achieve. And what we I think what we set about doing first of all was what weren't we? And we very quickly established we are not mental health experts. Not a single one of us has any formal training or certificate at all in that field. So we very quickly agreed that we are not there to offer guidance or support in such a framework.
In a clinical way.
In a clinical way. What we wanted to create is a network, is a private network for men, where we can share stories and experiences that we either see or read or watch about or have ourselves, and we share them in the hope that someone may take something away from that.
Fantastic.
And we've got our next one coming up. We've got Mike Delap coming on board now. He'll be covering a lot of what he did, his amazingly brave speech at PropX last year. And we already had the boys club running, and at PropX last year, I mean, literally straight after he finished that, I kind of hounded him in the lobby and was like,
"You've got to come talk to us."
That was brave. That was a lot, but please, there'll be a lot of guys who are not here who've not seen this.
But do you think step one is to step out of your own shadow in terms of, I mean, the word stigma comes to mind. So, men particularly, very brave, very, proud, not willing to step out of their own shadow. And what I mean by that is, I don't want to admit this. I don't want to admit that I've got some issues here. I'm anxious, or I'm nervous, or, I can't do this or I can't do that. Stepping out in a private group, so you're not doing it publicly, you're doing it amongst friends. That's got to be the first step, right?
Yeah, and I think what we've been careful to do is there's no pressure on anyone to do anything. You can be a member of the boys club, and you can be a member for the next 20 years and never post a comment. And
how
never,
do you become a member? Because
anything.
I'm subscribed to the group on Facebook. I've never done anything. I think I've fleetingly popped into a couple.
You can either find it
that Ben Madden's done, but does that make me a member because I've just clicked on the group and become a joiner?
That's it. Once you're in the group, you can either find the group and ask to be joined, and basically, if you're a guy, you're in. There are no rules to entry. Or every now and then, when I'm sat on the sofa, bored, nothing to do, I'll be like, right, time to go through my contacts and invite people. Another batch. I mean, we kind of made a conscious thing that we didn't want to launch it and invite every single guy we knew right from the offset, because we wanted to try and figure out, are we doing it right? Are we giving people what they need? And the feedback so far, with every story that we've had to date, at least one person has contacted one of us 5 to go, oh my God.
That was inspirational. I resonate with that.
I think quite often the very common theme is, I thought it was just me.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was literally like, you just read my mind or read my diary, or, there are people listening to stuff, and it is so almost exactly the journey, the emotional journey, the psychological journey.
But also the comfort that you'd get from that, knowing it's not just you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely, and it's
and
breaking
a safe
that
environment as well, a safe environment to talk.
And that's the thing. Again, we've been very careful. Like, again, it's we try not to comment or anything. Like I said, it's just about sharing things. So often, if I watch a really interesting video or I read a little article, and again, I like really short format stuff. I won't sit and watch long things. I'm not a big book reader. I just quite often don't have the patience.
You and I know each other very well. You are a genuinely lovely fella. But why do you give a shit? Honestly,
who doesn't want to be surrounded by happy people? Look, we're not always going to be happy all the time. I mean, I'm not under some sort of illusion that we're all going to be skipping around, grinning, and thinking the world's perfect every day. But I think if you pursue a life, if you spend your life pursuing joy for yourself and those around you, you should end up having a pretty good time.
I think they say the biggest endorphin you will ever get is helping others.
Yeah, I think I think interesting that probably is true, but I think for most people they would never kind of think about it that way. It doesn't get benchmarked in that way.
Well, it's not what society tells us. Society tells us that
it's
it's getting the next car, or it's the next big holiday that you can stick on Instagram, or it's the house that you can show everybody in the background. That tends to be the perception of joy, doesn't it?
I think
but that's part of the problem.
It's great the way that you're using social media to be a positive with the Boys Club. So hopefully that will, people listening today will look it up, and if it's right for them, we'll join. So
yeah, and please do look it up, get in touch, join. After 2 weeks, you might think this is an absolute load of bollocks and leave. That's fine. There's no judgment.
So
there's
we switch gears to
yes.
serial entrepreneur Kristjan Byfield.
yeah. Back to where did it all begin? Back at Stowe School.
Back at very posh privileged boarding school, yes.
And it was, it's one of the poshest schools in Britain. It's almost an Eton, isn't it?
Yeah, so I was actually offered a full scholarship to Eton. Wow. And told my parents that if they sent me there, I would run away.
So you would now probably be a prime minister or something.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe, or Harry's PR guru.
How did you end up at Stowe? So are you from a particularly wealthy, posh background?
No. So my dad was an art director / artist at the time. So when I started boarding, I actually started boarding school previous to that. I started boarding school at 8 years old. So at the time, my family were living in Singapore. The education system there wasn't great. By the time you were 18, you would have been at GCSE level. And my mum, who was always quite kind of alert to these things, said, look, it's great that we're pursuing my dad's career that was really at its kind of pinnacle. But she said, I don't really think that should be at the cost of our son's education. And I was always a very adventurous kid. I was the kid who, when I did sleepovers at friends' houses, I didn't cry when I got dropped off. I cried when my parents turned up to pick me up. So,
and when you say adventurous, you mean so you're at your mate's house at 7 or 8 years old, and they find you kind of looking through the drawers in the kitchen,
completely. I'd disappear for I'd go out in the morning. Like I was one of those kids who would disappear in the morning and come back after dark, and my parents would be like, "Where have you been?" I'd be like, I don't know.
Just wandering around.
But having fun.
Great.
I climbed down a well. I went over this.
Does that make it a bit dangerous to send you to boarding school? You could have wandered off for days.
Yeah, but I think life needs a little bit of danger. That's, coming back to the mental health thing, a bit of risk, a bit of danger, the possibility of failure, just as long as you don't give yourself too hard a time over it.
Yeah.
I think it's always important to remember, regardless of success or fail, it's never really that much to do with you. No. You only played an element to that
Don't beat yourself up over it.
Yeah, and don't credit yourself too much either.
And that's a theme that runs through all of our podcasts. Yeah. Everyone has failure in their background. You just have to use it as a leverage to get to success.
And I think failure actually is more interesting. I think you learn 10 times more from failure if you're honest with yourself.
Than not trying in the first place.
Oh, God, not trying. Yeah. Who wants to spend a life not trying?
So you go to Stowe at 8 years old.
So I went to school called Papwick at 8 years old. Did that for 5 years. That was like 7 to 13 was the full age feeder. But I did 8 to 13, and then did Stowe from 13 to 18.
But how'd you get into Stowe? Not everybody can do that. And if it's not a question of money.
So I got a half scholarship to there. I got what they called a Roxburgh scholarship at the time because I loved everything. I did well in academics.
So you were
bright. I was in the first for every sports team. I loved art, theatre, you name it. And that's why my parents chose Stowe, because it is a school above all others that caters to everything.
And for those that don't know,
facilities, so
the alumni from Stowe is David
Branson,
Niven,
Lord
Branson,
Sainsbury,
Henry Cavill.
David Niven, Henry Cavill was in my boarding school 2 years below me. I gave him acting tips.
Kristjan Byfield.
Stop there. So Kristjan Byfield went to school with Superman.
Yeah. Yeah. So I remember he, the year after I left was when he got his very first role in the Russell Crowe hostage movie. And Henry played Ransom and played the son. And it was shot at Stowe with him. That was his first role. And then I think after that, he did The Count of Monte Cristo, and it went on from there. And then he became a model.
So how did you do in Stowe?
All right.
academically? Because
all
you're
right.
academic anyway.
So I
they carry
did
on?
very well up to GCSEs. Like my GCSEs, kind of like, I don't know, 8 A's, 4 B's, and a C or something. Which I breezed through. I don't remember revising for a single topic.
You're probably in the pub.
I got Or
That's
yeah.
carried on.
I mean, the pubs were
All
quite
the
far
bike
away
checks.
because the grounds were big, but I was probably sat in some ridiculous ornate temple somewhere,
With some cider.
halfway through a bottle of vodka. It's probably more likely, right? But yeah, and then I very quickly, I really struggled with the academic things, and I got put under quite unusual pressure at the time by the school. Because I wanted to do theatre studies, design and art. And the school, which surprised me at the time because they were renowned at being this, it didn't matter what you wanted to do kind of thing. They turned around and went, there's nothing intellectual in there. So if you want to pursue those, we're taking your scholarship away.
Right. Because they want to be judged in terms of their statistics by academic achievement at A-level. And you didn't fit that.
So I ended up keeping theatre studies because I had a real kind of look at what did I want to do, and at that time I had decided that I wanted to pursue a career as a professional actor. So theatre studies was an obvious one, and then I ended up doing physics and I think chemistry.
Sounds like you really enjoyed them.
How does an actor then become the co-owner of a lettings business in Shoreditch?
I mean, well, that's not obvious.
So what happened? So your acting career didn't happen?
So did the 3 years, came out into the real world. I actually, unlike a lot of my cohort, I was really lucky. I came out and landed a really good job with him the first month. I got the lead in Ben Elton's Popcorn.
Did you? Right.
Off stage, yeah?
Off West End. So it was a fringe production.
Yeah.
Which was amazing because it was like the perfect blend of a stage production that felt like a movie. It's obviously a parody of Natural Born Killers.
Yeah,
a fantastic role. I got to get covered in fake tattoos and look like some demented hillbilly.
And you're what, 19?
Yeah, I was 21. So I was 21 then.
You get to meet Ben Elton.
Came out, did the show.
Whose politics clearly rubbed off on you.
Well, actually, in that show, during the course of doing that show, I knew I'd made a mistake. So we did, I think, 6 weeks of rehearsals. And what I realised a few weeks after that was the bit I loved about acting, the process, the discovery, the playing, the playing around with things, the trying things, the experimentation, the developing of a role. What I very quickly realised was that the actual reality of then doing the same performance
night after night,
9 times a week. Now, thankfully, we were on a short run. I've got friends who've signed 6 or 12-month contracts on shows. This was initially an 8-week run.
So it's a literal Groundhog Day.
And after 2 weeks of the show, I was ready to punch myself in the face. I was so bored. And after 4 weeks, we got offered to take it on tour because it got really good reviews. Apologies to the rest of the cast because I basically canned that because I just turned around and went, absolutely fucking not.
Sod that.
Absolutely not. And at this crisis, I just spent 3 years and a lot of money because drama college was private and with my parents living abroad, there was no funding for it. It was a real... And so I tried to move over. I thought, well, maybe film and TV will be more the thing. So I did some small, low budget, like film projects. I did about 3 of those. And that kind of pretty much like cemented the fact that, I'm not acting is really good fun, but as a career, absolutely not. And over the course of that year as well, I saw a lot of people I knew who were incredibly talented actors lose out on roles and then seeing the actual production at the end.
So you realised that it would be a career of disappointment.
There is no... It's not a fair industry. It's so much about who you know.
So
and
no joy.
Have you got the look you want?
No joy.
No joy.
Yeah, and I think there was no... in an industry where kind of there's no rules. The best person doesn't get the job. doesn't necessarily get the job.
So the natural thing as a consequence of that is to become a letting agent.
Well, of course.
Of course. How could you not join those dots, Kristjan?
So I think that stemmed out of, I just spent 3 years training to do a career I'd realised that I didn't want to do. So did I want to risk doing that again and amounting another ton of debt? Absolutely not. But at the same time, I had debts to pay. I had a life to start building. And so it was, what can I go and do where where I don't need to go and retrain, and where there is a moderate income to be earned pretty much from the offset. And literally I was living in Muswell Hill at the time, and round the corner from us was an old school recruitment shop.
Yeah.
And they had a sign in the window saying lettings and eggs wanted. Now, when I grew up, we moved house pretty much every year because my mum adored buying project houses. Right. So we would buy them, we'd do them up whilst we lived in them, and then 2 years later, see another thing.
So you already understood the moving process.
Yes.
Loved that. My dad was a huge architecture fan, and that's what his art has always been focused on, is architectural history. So he brought me up talking a lot about the different eras of architecture and always asked. So I had a natural fascination in property. And so when I saw it, I was kind of like, yeah, it kind of sounds interesting. And I went in and I had a chat, and the lady in the recruitment office was lovely. And she was like, well,
you roll.
First question, do you have a driving license? Yeah. No. She's like, okay, you might want to figure that one out. But then asked a few questions and was like, look, you're too young, and you don't have any relevant skills at the moment, but, go off and do X, Y, Z, and then maybe come back to us. In my true form, I was like, don't think I need any of that. So but it had sparked that thing of interest. So I just went out and started looking for recruitment jobs. And there was a company at the time called MySpace, who still run now. They're owned by different people. It's actually now owned and run by the guy I worked there with. But they were about a year, 18 months old, and they were looking for their first employee.
Right.
And it was Emma and Eric, Emma Basden and Eric Ossenden. Emma was ex-Foxtons.
So this was a letting agency.
Yeah. Green and yellow ran through that woman's veins. I mean, she was...
But it's yet again a story of rejection that spurs you on to a lady in a recruitment agency in Muswell Hill says, no, and then you... no, I'm not going to take no.
But also, if we're going to psychoanalyse him just for a second, being at boarding school, from a young age, and then going to a school where actually you might feel a little bit beholden because gun to your head, scholarship, that could be taken away. That then makes you become very independently and strong-minded, I think, which is why you were a bit belligerent. I thought, no, okay, sod that. I don't care what she's just said in the recruitment office. I'm just going to go and do what I want to do anyway.
I've never been good at being told no.
Yeah.
I don't mind being told no if you can tell me why it's a no, and you can get me on board with those reasons. But if you're just going to say no without substantiation, I'll probably push you out the way and show you how it's done.
Yeah. Which is what you did when you launched Base with Anne.
Yeah. So fell into it, loved it. I mean, that first job, they gave me a choice. They said, right, this is how it all works. This is how this is how deals are structured. You got a choice, 10 grand basic with 10% commission or 20% commission only. I said 20% commission only, thanks.
Wow.
Pioneer of the self-employed.
Well, I very quickly looked at, it was very quick calculations, but it was looking at what I should have been banking each month. It was a substantial difference.
But I reckon most people, 70 or 80% of people would have gone for the other option.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But for me, it was like, I'm not going to keep doing it if I'm not good at it. Yeah. And if I'm good at it, then I make a lot more money.
Yeah.
And within 4 months, they sat me down and went, so about the 20%. And I went, absolutely fucking not.
Stay as we are.
Yeah, and I loved it. And they were great. They put me on I was like, I don't have a driving license. Said, not a problem. We'll put you on a 1-day CBT course. We'll buy you a scooter. Problem solved. And that was it. 2 days later, I was on the road. And I loved it. I loved that 6 months. And that came to a very abrupt end when I had a motorbike accident. Got taken out by a van out on viewings. Yeah, a guy not looking what he was doing, pulled out and T-boned me on the motorbike.
Badly? As in
Bad enough. Split my knee open.
Right.
Was laid up for about a month. But
with no commission coming
well, and also the company couldn't wait.
Right.
So I was out for about a month or two, at which point, kicking around, oh my God, I've walked away from a career I spent 3 years training. Crisis of conscience, tried to kind of go back to acting and then very quickly realised, what the fuck are you doing? You made the right decision in the first place. and then went looking for another job, and decided I wanted to do something new, and saw a job advertised on the Isle of Dogs, and went and saw what on the surface looked like an incredibly successful business, but also at the time very unique, quite different to what was out there. It had this full package offering of sales and lettings, but also interior design, furnishings,
furnished packages
finance,
and,
out of a single branch offering. Which and that, you know, the branch was spectacular, marble floors and a nice, and it was great. And the what turned out. So it was a company called Homes Direct.
Okay.
And there are people out there who will hear that word and it will send shivers down their spine. Because, as I kind of alluded to in that description, how it looked was not the reality.
Mm-hmm. So it was a facade for something.
It was a company that had started well with every right intention, but the owner had lost his way due to ego and too much cocaine going up his nostrils.
And nicked a load of client money?
By the time I left, he owed about £5 million in stolen rent and deposits.
Yeah.
But it was where I met Anne.
Oh, so she was there.
Where I met my fantastic friend, work wife, business partner.
A fateful meeting.
Yeah, and it didn't start off quite as well as everyone might think it did.
Were you competitors on the floor?
No, so Anne was the lister.
Right.
And shit me, is that woman a good lister? But she was the lister, and that was literally her job. She had literally a diary. There was a team of 2 people whose job it was to literally just fill her diary, and she went out and did 5 to 8 valuations a day. She literally would come in the morning, go out and do 3 or 4, come back for lunch,
but she'd come back with most of them
and go back out. 95% strike rate. I mean, she was insane.
So that business goes. You're now, buddies. So you're getting on.
So initially we didn't start off well because she thought because I walked in and they set me quite higher targets than anyone else on the team, and I went, yeah, that's fine. And so she thought I was the most arrogant prick she'd ever met.
But she's also
until she saw me smash every single target every month.
She's also now thinking he's just raised the bar for all of us. Thanks.
Yeah.
And
back to John Ennis.
And what I very quickly realised, but they hadn't realised the value of Anne. You know, I had 3 other negs I was competing with on lettings. And so every morning we had an 8 o'clock morning before the office started at 8 o'clock. Now this I thought was genius at the time because we would be hot spotted. We weren't allowed to bring the availables list in. So Anne would talk about what she'd seen the day before, what was going to be coming on, what might. And then we would also be spot checked on the entire availables list. So we would be expected to be able to write down our entire availables list from memory.
Wow.
Address, bedrooms, price, availability date. Is it furnished? Has it got parking? You were expected to know every listing like that. And that was brilliant training. But what I very quickly realised is, what the fuck are we waiting for Anne to tell stuff in? So I knew her valuations would always last exactly an hour. And I knew the last 10 minutes was her just having a lovely little chat with the client. So I would call her at 50 minutes past every single hour. So in the morning when she got in, I would not let her leave the office until I knew exactly what 4 properties she was saying at what time.
Yeah.
And I would then call out my entire database for every single one of those properties.
And get them set up.
And I would call her at 50 minutes into every single val and go,
did you get it?
How's it going? Would they be open to me bringing 3 people around tonight?
Which would help
and I'm sure it helped her
to close.
But it also meant,
you got the
very
jump on
quickly,
else.
what happened was Anne would then next morning say, great news, guys, we've taken on these 4 properties. And one of the guys would go, oh, when can we get in to see that? And I'd go, yeah, so those 3 are already let.
How often do you think that happens in modern day letting agency in Britain right now?
Very rarely.
Yeah.
Very
Just
rarely.
waiting for right move, aren't they? Just waiting for a hit to the block.
How do you get to base? Let's skip forward to how do you both, because you co-found base together.
So as I alluded to, we worked for a company which on the surface looked great. And then very quickly when I got to see behind the curtain, that was very quickly revealed to be the opposite. But there were already practices in the business we didn't like. We felt like tenants were ripped off with tenant fees. We felt landlords in London, where rents are high and fees are high compared to the vast majority of the country, we felt like landlords were charged a lot of money. And with a lot of agencies, you were lucky if you got a coffee-stained, dog-eared tenancy agreement and gas safety certificate. And if they really sport you, you might get an inventory. And we just felt like there was a better way. And when we also looked at the figures, we couldn't in our head compute why there was this disparity of attitudes in agency between sales is where you make your money and lettings is a bit of a pain in the arse and
you saw it the other way around.
We looked at it the other way because we just went, yeah, but you only sell a property every decade. And I get revenue every single year. So I could sell a house and make 15 grand, or I can make 5 grand a year for 10 years. Why is 50 grand's revenue not perceived as less valuable than 15?
Yeah.
I mean, we now live in an industry where that perception has come
Changed.
around and has switched, and rightly so. But that was what we saw, and we felt that, and the other realization we'd made is that, you know, tenants are tenants, they rent, but we just felt they could just be given a nicer time. But what we saw in the business we worked in was we saw landlords who were getting crap service, half the time having missing rent, and yet they were still loyal. And so the other business aspect for us was that if that's how loyal a customer is to a
bad
business,
service,
imagine how loyal they would be to a great business.
And imagine that you might be able to charge a bit more because you're proving that your service is better.
And the time you've been in business now
that.
for 20 years there is testament to the core values you put into the business, the way you look after your staff. You were telling us off camera about the shuts down over Christmas and just giving back and looking after them, which is absolutely fascinating and fantastic, which a lot of companies just do not do.
But so what happens? So you go to the local pub, you go to, I don't know, the Dickens or wherever, and you and Anne sit there over a couple of drinks. Who says to who,
let's open?
Fuck it, let's do this together.
So originally Anne was going to be my first employee. So originally I was like, fuck this shit, we're going to go off. I'm going to go and start an agency. And very quickly that was like, you are going to, I need you in my business. I'm going to start the business. You're going to go out and put landlords on the books. Mm-hmm. And thank Christ, Anne went home and talked to her partner Diana, and Diana went, hold on, you've been in this industry for 7 years. Kristjan's been in it for about 18 months.
Why the hell are you working for him?
And he's 23 and you're 30.
Yeah.
What? Why?
Yeah, this should be more collaborative.
And I got a call from Anne saying, we need to have a chat. And I thought, because she'd been headhunted 3 times already in the industry. No, I thought she was going to turn around and go, I'm really sorry, but such and such has approached me and offered me this, and I
got to go.
Yeah, good job, good salary. Yeah. And thank Christ that wasn't what she said. But she turned around and said, I'm really, really sorry, I'm not going to come and work for you. And my heart sang. She went, but I will be your business partner.
Nice.
Fantastic.
And what was your reaction?
My initial reaction was, shit, was not expecting that, but glad you're not leaving.
But was your reaction, damn, that means the profit's just halved? Or did you think, hang on, she's such a superstar, being 50-50 with someone that's that good is going to ultimately be even better for me? Genuinely,
my initial reaction was just, thank Christ she's not been poached by someone. But it was a bit, but yeah, absolutely right. It was, hold on, this was going to be my thing. And then I went home and spoke to my now wife, and, you know, as is often the case, you know, she put some very sensible things to me, which is, you know, Anne and I had already built a friendship over, you know, there were a lot of things we were aligned on, but also we're quite yin and yang. I'm the ideas and Mr. Ideal, and can be a little bit glass half empty and is very much a detail person. And she was like, I think you need.
So your vision
might be quite handy.
Your vision, she's ops.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is why you've now split your roles, where she runs base and you run this newish business, Depositary.
So just tell us a little bit about Depositary.
So Depositary came out of base. So one of the things with base is we never stop changing and evolving. We always want to be becoming a better business, and we look at that every aspect. That we look first and foremost from our owner and resident point of view, and how do we make that better. But there is also a huge part of that, which is how do we make our staff happy. And for several years, and I'll be totally honest, we actually have dropped this the last 3 or 4 years, and this Christmas just gone is the first time we've actually, I think, re-implemented it since COVID. But what we used to do every year is we would have kind of what I'd call an autopsy day or a team day. So, and very simply, we would take a complete day out. No one was allowed to have appointments on the day. And it would start off with each of us, with me and Anne sitting down with each of the team, one by one, out of the office for half an hour to an hour. And we would just talk about them and their role. And it would be, what do you love? What do you hate? You know, if I could change one thing about your job tomorrow, what would it be? What is the thing when it lands in your inbox or on your desk makes you go, oh,
you dread? Yeah.
And what is the thing that when you do it makes you feel like a, you know, like
And
a
the
god?
answer was end of tenancy.
Well, and this is, and you know, that always fed into, and then we would come towards as a chat. And in 2016, every single person in the company said, please do something about end of tenancies. It's horrendous. They were like, no one wins.
Well, everyone's
we do a
unhappy.
ton of work.
We hate it.
Yeah.
Tenants
Tenants
hates it.
feel like we're
Landlord
ripping them
hates
off
it.
and it's a dodge. Landlords think we're trying to able the tenants to just get away scot-free.
That's a serious problem, but for lots of participants.
For a lot, yeah, it was just messy and crap for everyone. And so, you know, and that's where that journey started. So we went and looked, was there anything in the space?
you could buy
No,
or
we
off
looked
shelf?
at, really the only thing we saw, there was a couple of CRMs that have really light touched it, where you can literally kind of ledger what's being deducted. But other than that, that was it. And then kind of, you know, I was already quite involved in the prop tech scene by then, so I hadn't heard any kind of rumours about anyone working on anything. And we'd nearly done a fixed flow when Raj launched fixed flow. Right. So we had come up with a fixed flow-esque concept and were tendering that with devs when Raj walked in our door for the first time and went, look at this amazing thing I've built.
Yeah. Which is since sold for millions.
Yeah. But at the time it was great because we were a much younger business and we didn't have the time, knowledge or resources to do a fixed flow.
So Kristjan, give
we
me
solved
the
the problem.
elevator pitch for Depositary.
So we are looking to improve the end of tenancy process for all stakeholders. So looking at it from an agent's or a corporate landlord entity basis, we're looking to massively reduce the administrative burden on the business, which we do by about 85 to 90%. We're looking to streamline and automate processes and compliance. So again, for larger organisations, it's there. Looking at it from a tenant perspective, we wanted to make them feel like they were in a more legitimate and balanced process, where they felt they were more readily protected by the tenancy deposit legislation structure. And so we wanted them to feel that deductions were more justified and fairly negotiated. And what we also wanted to do was get tenants back their money sooner, because the average deposit is 21 days. That's a long time.
And with Depositary, it's
So we're currently averaging about 13.
13 days. And
our ultimate goal is to get it to single digits. Our goal is to get
But you have a ticker to show how many tenancies that you've actually assisted. So what's that up to now?
So we're now at, I think we've passed 57,000. I think we're on about 57,500. I think the current average today is live average at the moment is like about 11 days.
And if I'm a lettings agent at the moment and I'm thinking this is a pain point for me as well, how do they get in touch with Depositary and get in touch with you?
So, I mean, anyone who wants to find out more can reach out through any of the normal channels, jump on our website, you know, and again, you can find out more any which way. There's a lot of content we've put out there, so people can, if they don't want to talk straight away, they can go out and find a little bit. On our website, you'll also find lots of agents that use us. So if you would rather find, if you see an agent, give them a chat, find out what they think about it. But otherwise, typically either jump on a 10, 15-minute call with us, or we do a full end-to-end 1-hour demo and Q&A. And you can just go on our website and just book it in at a date.
Or just find you in the nearest pub at any property event in the UK during 2025.
Although you probably won't get the most detailed and thorough demo, but I will definitely be very kind of I will espout the benefits of the platform, no doubt.
I apologise to you, or not apologise, because we got so engrossed at the beginning of the podcast into the Boys Club, which I think is really relevant and massively important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I feel we've skipped over your 20-year base journey, which will have had its highs and lows and everything in between. But from the people I've met who work with you and people that I know have dealt with you, it absolutely delivers what it says. It's going to give you a joy to deal with.
That's it. It's the joy, and I think for any agency owner out there, again, it's make sure you kind of define for yourself what success looks like.
Yeah.
So we very quickly found with Base, we had these huge ambitions about how many branches and staff we were going to have, and we're very, very happy being a one branch business and a small team.
But also we should again highlight that yours is probably not just one of the most successful, but one of the longest and most robust business partnerships, you and Anne, in the property sector. I mean, you're 21 years in business, but obviously you met previously, so you're 25 years in?
So probably 23 years.
That doesn't happen very often.
No. That's brilliant.
And I can count on one hand the contentious moments that we've had in that relationship.
Brilliant.
And most of those were early on.
She is brilliant, and I can't wait to have her on this podcast.
Yeah, she'd be far more interesting than me.
Kristjan, the ultimate spreader of joy, thank you for joining us today. I'm sure our listeners will be wanting more, which is what we like to do, is leave them wanting to find out more. That's the end. That's the wrap of episode 24 of the Two Russells podcast. Episode 25 will be coming to you live from the Women in Estate Agency event on the 6th of March. So if you're attending that event, come and find us, and all guests are welcome. So it should be a very exciting day for me and for Russell.
And they've still got tickets left. I think they've got about a third of the tickets still left. So if you haven't got one, get one.
Yeah, and you don't have to be a woman to go, by the way. In fact, if you're a man, I went for the first time last year, we all did.
Yeah.
I found it genuinely enlightening.
It's brilliant.
And captivating. Some of the stories, challenges, adversity, stories of success. It really is for everybody.
It's a very, very, very special day.
It is.
So that just leaves me to say thank you for listening. Please press the like, follow, share, subscribe buttons on whichever platform that you have, and tell your friends about it. But all I've got to say is it's good night from me.
And it's good night from him.